All right, I wanted to hit up Klobuchar because Klobuchar here is addressing some criticisms that she didn't do enough to keep bad cops off the street.
I have said repeatedly, back when I was the county attorney, the cases that we had involving shootings went to a grand jury. That was true in every jurisdiction across our state, and that was true in many jurisdictions across the country. I think that was wrong now. I think it would have been much better if I took the responsibility and looked at the cases and made the decision myself. But let me make this clear. We did not blow off these cases. We brought them to a grand jury, presented the evidence for a potential criminal prosecution, and the grand jury would come back with a decision. That is how we handled the cases. That aside, I want to move forward, and I think the best way we move forward is, one, prosecutors taking responsibility themselves.
Okay, so speaking of a grand jury, because you mentioned a grand jury a couple times in there, from my knowledge, a grand jury is a type of jury. It's not like the normal jury that you think of in like a criminal case or anything. It's a group of people put together with a judge who the prosecutor goes to with information, and it's kind of like a dry test run of a trial to see if the jury says that this should go to court, or if the jury indicts based on what the prosecutor gives them. The defense isn't part of a grand jury. Just the prosecutor is, and they bring up all the evidence and they say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And they go, "Yes or no." It's like the magic conch, you know. He asks a question and he spits out an answer. That's it. Resting on the grand jury for all of this, I'm not sure how I feel about that. And she said there that she thinks it would be better to take these instances into her own hands. I feel very uncomfortable with the idea that prosecutors just kind of like throw these cases up and to the grand jury and then just like walk away if they don't get exactly what they want. That being said, I mean, they're prosecutors and they went to law school. I did not, but just outside looking in, I don't like it. I feel like at least prosecutors don't have to go off the exact word of a grand jury. So it's not like the grand jury comes back and they say, "Yeah, we wouldn't indict off of like what you given us. That's it for the case, and that person's like scot-free." Like I said, it's just a test run. So they could come back, the grand jury could come back and say, "Nah, we don't think so," and the prosecutor could go along and bring these charges against them anyways. But I like this as a little idea of butterfly effect, you know. It's very interesting that these prosecutors, they go on, these sorts of prosecutors go on that were in Amy Klobuchar's place, that are in Amy Klobuchar's predecessor's place, to think about how, they're in their place. You know, they throw these things to this grand jury. They come back. They don't get exactly what they want with these cases for these police officers who have a mountain of criminal complaints. Well, a mountain of complaints against them from community members who've been wronged by them. I'm not sure why a police officer with like 10 complaints should still be on the force with lethal power, like any regular officer would. I think that person should at the very least be pushed back to like a desk job for a couple months. You know, maybe even if it's not even if they come back and there's nothing serious, if you have that many complaints racking up against you, you're probably doing something wrong. Let's be honest. You're probably doing something wrong. People don't normally go and jump through the hoops to file a complaint against a police officer like that, unless there's something really wrong that they did. I think we should listen to our community a little bit more on that, Amy. But it's very interesting to see these prosecutors. I mean, Amy probably never thought of Chauvin after she looked at the files. And I want to be clear that Amy Klobuchar didn't handle the original complaints that came up against Derek Chauvin, the guy who went on to kill George Floyd. She didn't handle that case. She didn't. But there were other officers who went on to do things as well that she didn't bring charges against. She didn't prosecute. She didn't continue on with the information that was brought to her. She didn't press any charges. And these people went on to hurt other people in those communities. And thankfully, not all of them ended up the same way that that Floyd did. But who knows? Maybe some did, and we just haven't heard those stories yet. But those prosecutors probably didn't think anything of these cases ever again. But the sad thing is that the people with no power, with no voice over what happens to these people, are the ones who suffer the most when negligence runs rampant through these sorts of communities. You know, and I find it hard to believe that there's no bias coming down from these prosecutors. I mean, we saw with the Ahmaud Arbery case. How many prosecutors did they have to run through? How many prosecutors had to recuse themselves because they just couldn't be non-biased in this case? I mean, the prosecutors work with the police. Do you know how hard it is to prosecute your work buddies? You know, this comes up against your work buddy. You just went out to go golfing with this guy last weekend, and now they're telling you to put this guy in jail. It's hard to tell me that there's no bias there. It's hard to tell anybody that there's no bias there with a straight face. I don't know. But it all comes back around. It all comes back around. And with Klobuchar and her, with the, to be as charitable as possible, a shoddy record when it comes to her criminal justice history in Minnesota. This is not a good look for her. It's really not. And I'm thinking that this is probably not the person that Biden wants to take up as his running mate come November. You know, that's just me.